Hello and welcome to JP Global. Has Donald Trump reached the limits of military pressure on Iran? Can Benjamin Netanyahu persuade Washington to resume the war, or will diplomacy prevail? And as Donald Trump welcomes the Israeli Prime Minister to the White House, is this meeting the beginning of a new Middle East strategy or merely a pause before an even larger regional conflict? These are the questions hanging over one of the most consequential meetings since the US-Iran war began. Trump and Netanyahu are expected to discuss the future of negotiations with Tehran, Israel's ongoing military operations in Lebanon, the implementation of the regional ceasefires, and the next phase of America's Middle East strategy. The talk will also cover the future of the Abraham Accords and whether more Arab states can be brought into the normalization process, especially Saudi Arabia, as Trump, after signing a nuclear deal with Saudi Arabia, attached Abraham Accord string to move forward. Yet, behind the diplomatic optics lies a more fundamental question. Do Washington and Tel Aviv still share the same vision of how this conflict should end? The timing of the meeting is no coincidence. The bombs have stopped for now. After nearly 2 weeks of intense airstrikes, the United States has paused its military campaign against Iran. Tehran has also temporarily suspended retaliatory attacks, while Oman has also once again stepped in to mediate between Washington and Tehran. Pakistan's efforts are also being reported to resume the talk between the both parties. But this is not the peace. This is merely a temporary pause in a conflict where neither side has achieved the principal objectives. Washington has failed to force Iran into strategic submission, while Tehran has been unable to break American military and economic pressure. The battlefield is expanding. Global energy markets remain volatile, and every possible next move carries greater risks. Complicating matters further is the growing divergence between Trump and Netanyahu. While Trump increasingly appears to favor a negotiated settlement after discovering that the military pressure alone cannot force Tehran to surrender, Netanyahu continues to argue that Iran's nuclear ambition must be eliminated and is expected to press for a tougher approach. Differences over Lebanon, regional strategy, and even US arms sales to Turkey suggest that although the two leaders remain close allies, they may no longer agree on what victory actually looks like. The central question, therefore, is no longer simply who can win this war. It is whether Trump can balance diplomacy, military pressure, and Israel's security concerns without being drawn into another prolonged Middle East conflict, and whether Iran, despite mounting economic pain, is preparing to make the concessions Washington demands. This is our story to dig in today. It seems that Donald Trump's strategy has reached its limit. Donald Trump entered the conflict believing that the overwhelming military pressure could force Tehran to alter its strategic calculation. The plan was straightforward: destroy Iranian's military capabilities, tighten economic pressures, and compel Iran to return to the negotiations on American terms, and get the result in weeks. But now, in the 5th month in war, even more, after signing the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding later, both countries had again started attacking after Iran was accused of violating the MOU. After 13 consecutive nights of bombing from the US, however, the results have been far more complicated. Although US strikes inflicted serious damage to Iranian military infrastructure, facilities, and strategic assets, they failed to alter Tehran's fundamental positions and behavior. Iran continues to assert its authority over shipping through the Strait of Hormuz and has shown little willingness to abandon its core demand. Reports indicate that the US military commanders warned the White House that the bombing campaign was approaching its operational limits. Concerns reportedly emerged over precision weapon stockpiles and whether additional strikes would significantly change Iran's political calculations. American intelligence assessments similarly concluded that the military action alone was unlikely to force Tehran into accepting Washington's demand, or to be more exact, Trump's demand. Military superiority weakened Iran, but it did not produce political victory. Trump's remaining options are becoming even more dangerous. Washington's remaining choices are becoming increasingly costly, and there are, as we mentioned before, the reports are emerging that US is running out of weapons. Once again, Trump seems to be facing the same situation he faced when he started the war. A broader military escalation, potentially involving ground operation, could exploit America's overwhelming military superiority, but would risk heavy casualties and another prolonged Middle East war. Expanding airstrikes against Iranian ports, oil infrastructure, and energy facilities could inflict greater economic damage but may still fail to produce political concessions. A naval blockage could further squeeze Iran's oil exports, yet it would also increase the likelihood of attacks on commercial shipping, deepen the global energy crisis, and raise oil prices worldwide. Then what? Diplomacy remains the least costly option. But any agreement would almost certainly require compromises that many American policymakers and some regional allies, especially Israel, would find politically difficult to accept. Trump sought a quick military victory. Instead, he now faces a conflict in which every available option carries significant strategic costs. Iran is weakened, no doubt about that, but still holds important leverage. Although Iran has suffered considerable military and economic damages, it continues to possess several powerful strategic advantages. Its greatest source of leverage remains the Strait of Hormuz. Their trump card is out now, through which a substantial share of the world's oil and liquid natural gas exports passed. This narrow waterway gives Tehran influence that far exceeds its conventional military strength. Iran also retains the ability to pressure Americans' interests through drones, ballistic missiles, naval mines, and regional partners, including the Houthis in Yemen. In other words, United States can continue damaging Iran's military infrastructure, but eliminating Tehran's ability to disrupt regional stability remains far more difficult. The confrontation is no longer confined to the Persian Gulf. In the Red Sea, Iran-aligned Houthi forces have threatened commercial shipping around Bab al-Mandab while targeting Saudi-linked energy infrastructure, increasing insurance costs, and creating fresh concerns about the global trade. What began as a dispute over one strategic maritime choke point is steadily evolving into much broader regional crisis. But you should also remember that Iran's economy is under mounting pressure. Strategic leverage comes at a steep economic prices. American naval blockade continues to threaten Iran's oil exports, particularly through Khark Island, which handles most of the country's crude shipments. Reduced exports are shrinking government's revenue while damaging long-term economic recovery. Conflict has also disrupted natural gas production, worsened electricity shortages, and forced rolling blackouts. And the conflict has also disrupted natural gas production, worsened electricity shortages, and forced rolling blackouts. The conflict has also disrupted natural gas production, worsened electricity shortages, and forced rolling blackouts across several cities. Fuel shortages have pushed authorities to consider raising petrol prices despite fears that doing so could trigger renewed public protest. For ordinary Iranians, the war has intensified an already severe economic crisis marked by inflation, unemployment, declining purchasing power, and rising poverty. Military pressure is also exposing divisions inside Iran's political establishment. According to reporting by New York Times journalist Farnaz Fasihi, a pragmatic faction led by President Masoud Pezeshkian and Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf reportedly believes Iran should capitalize on its military resilience to negotiate with Washington and secure relief from sanctions. hardline faction, particularly influential elements within the IRGC, strongly oppose compromises and view negotiations as a form of surrender. Following the death of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei and the reported rise of Mujtaba Khamenei, decision-making appears to have become increasingly concentrated among security and military elites. Whether pragmatists or hardliners ultimately prevail may determine whether the current pause evolves into diplomacy or another phase of escalation. While Washington increasingly appears interested in managing the conflict, Israel's objectives remain considerably While Washington increasingly appears interested in managing the conflict, Israel's objectives remain considerably broader. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has consistently argued that the conflict should end only after Iran's nuclear ambitions are decisively eliminated or the Iran's regime itself is fundamentally weakened or changed. Even if Washington eventually pursues a negotiated settlement, Israel may continue advocating a much more decisive military outcomes. This divergence complicates American diplomacy and makes any lasting agreement considerably more difficult. Economics and political costs continue to rise. The conflict is also producing consequences far beyond the battlefield. Oil markets remain extremely sensitive to developments around Hormuz and Bab el-Mandab, especially now, where any disruption could threaten global energy supplies. China, Iran's largest oil consumer, has reportedly reduced purchasing, while bilateral trade has weakened under growing uncertainty. Now, inside the United States, the political costs are also increasing. High fuel prices threaten consumers while the administration faces mounting electoral pressure ahead of the midterm elections. Public opinion is also becoming less supportive. A recent survey also found a CBS YouGov survey found that only 31% of Americans believe they clearly understand the conflict. Only 40% think the United States currently has the advantage, and 76% believe that war has become more difficult than initially expected. Neither side has achieved its central objectives. Iran cannot defeat the United States militarily, but the United States also failed to compel Iran to abandon its strategic demands. Military strikes have weakened Tehran without forcing political surrender. Iran's economy continues to deteriorate, yet its ability to threaten global energy market ensures that it still possesses meaningful leverage. Israel seeks decisive victory. Washington increasingly seeks a manageable settlement. Iran seeks survival without capitulation. These competing objectives makes any comprehensive settlement extraordinarily difficult. The bottom line is US-Iran confrontation has evolved into far more than a military conflict. It has become a struggle over nuclear deterrence, regional influence, maritime security, energy market, and political survival. Trump is discovering that overwhelming military superiority does not automatically translate into political success. Iran is discovering that strategic resilience comes with economic costs and social costs, enormous social and economic costs. The bombs may have stopped for now, but the underlying conflicts remains unresolved, and the next phase is likely to be determined not only on the battlefield but also in the diplomatic negotiations taking place behind closed doors in Washington, Tehran, and across the Middle East, and also in Pakistan.